pu Haulianlal Guite to keman khom dinga zanfa program inagono network ke su lo in dei bangin an che thei pon hizong le tunia ball kit thei dinga ball do thei dinga phat pha damna im zalun eke pa win chule hita bang ni kho pha e pe pa the ni thangwa win amazon tu ni khangdong pe ho to phat man khom ding kho sana tu phat chan ge office a omai ho to phat mang thei dinga om te ha chula ke pa thu se re ipi hilai phat te ho ipat masangun pathin koma ki bop sa na ken hin nei ngin taw na ne uten jeu te nga phat ban chalo ite taw te pakai ka ke pa we nang man ni kho pha nei pe win zan thaim nung dei bangin thilima cha an hi thei ta lo dang la tu ni nang man ni kho pha phat pha nei pe ki do wa chi ka so pi pau Haulianlal Guite to phat mong khom thei dinga nei koi zalun ka ke pa win min ka thang ba we nang man phat chom cha ka hong ki man cha na sung ding wa nei pi wa technology hin mang cha ding ka hi win ki su mon the ha ko ni nang man e we mun lang ka phat do phat cha man tam ta ka zo thei ni ding win na pi na ngai jin chule ti cha pa jong phat cha ki gun na te ho sei do thaya ama hin kho a ko na khangdong tam pi in hitabang lol hin na he hen mu do thei ni ding win nang man ka phat ki man cha na te ho na pi win chule ama jong mang chan tin ka phat theu na ko na hung ki bop sen ka pa kai je superstar min na ta we amen ki paumin plain amasa introduce hinbol masangin hechizau tingle koi ham ti hi ane hechinu hitin abande atu sei ngai dingin ana ki gong hitin tunil hain mitampi zanha dei bangin hi thei ta lo jang le tampi hung pangform ki thayun tuni hung pangthe ho zo se chunga jong ki pa thu sein chule khangdong lamhil minin kan li mowe pu Haulianlal Guite hi tula tua Additional Secretary Water Resources, Minor Irrigation and Chief Executive Officer, State Health Agency, Manipur. Tu pera in pu Haulianlal 2009 batch IAS officer Rajasthan cadre hin ama hitula tua he Manipur state on deputation hung kisola he chule educational background kamcha ga veo hitin ama hin BA in philosophy, BA honors in philosophy, Saint Stephen College, Delhi University, and Chayin. Chichun UPSC adding in Hasatan and Nakigong in UPSC Amuzowin, MA Sociology Ignova, Abol Kidin, Chule Tuhin, PhD Political Science, MNIT Zaipula, Abols in Lai Hetium to Aiga, say dot nomun, Chule. Academic interest he chakisi bangin ga hinsemgin. He wrote the philosophical novel called Confessions of the Dying Mind, The Blind Fate of Atheism, published by Bloomsbury. And he also wrote a paper called Measuring Deracination that attempts to quantify forced migration incidents in March 2019. He wrote and presented a paper in an international online conference titled COVID-19 Pandemic Lockdown and the Surrender of Liberty that presents the concept of human frustrating point and bounded satisficity, which was published recently, July 2020. He's currently writing another book on how social media changes everything. And hichi lekhabu jong han publish aisim kalu hinga lalovin khangdong chan pi tampi nang to interaction nei khom nu min tampi jan la chun zoom limit hi zakhata hi in zakhat chu within short period of time in full pa in ahin dei bangin anahi thai po hi jong la tu in about 50 novel in hikedwin hi jong la ki paw men tun nang phad kan petawe.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone, and
Good
I
afternoon.
want to thank Khangdong Lamhil for creating this second opportunity again, given how yesterday it was not according to satisfaction due to the network issues at the place of my residence, of my current residence. Probably that's one reason why I should shift my residence to somewhere else. But fortunate in one sense that we are here today because one of the strange surprise which I face when I come here is the working hours. Is that Manipur government actually works even on Saturdays. So that's a really good thing which they have done. And that is why, luckily, fortunately for us, although the connection is bad at home, I can go to work today. And now that it's 5, it's exactly probably the right time for giving this talk. And I hope it will be useful since most of you, I suppose, had come yesterday also. So this is your second time. And I hope that 1 hour you spend with us here today will be useful for you. So the moderator has given a very good introduction. I will not add to it. I'm a little bit blushing also for that nice, lovely introduction piece that he gave. But coming straight to the topic, since you are here to know more about how to enter into the IAS and also about the second part of the presentation of the talk regarding the implementation of Ayushman Bharat in Manipur. So Indian Administrative Service, I suppose virtually everybody who comes here today wants to know how to get through to it. But the difficulty is not so much in how one should get through, but in actually getting through. Of course, it's about so many combinations. One is hard work. Second, which is equally important as hard work, is smart work. Smart work. That's very important, and I'll emphasize a little bit on that later on. And thirdly, what we also call as the G factor. The G factor are mostly acts of God. What in um, signing off agreements and contracts are known under the term force majeure incidents. Force majeure incidents are beyond your control or my control, and these are simply called acts of God. So those circumstances, because they are beyond our control, we can't do much about it. But those include things like better, like you might have prepared for a certain paper as for a certain topic in a certain paper. Let's say for geography is your optional. So the exact question that you prepared for came this time. Or maybe in prelims, you decided to ignore art and culture section entirely. So that year, art and culture questions do not come. So that is essentially an act of God. It depends upon chance. But there's nothing we can do about it. So we'll focus instead on how to prepare the exam. That is, first on hard work and second smart work. There is absolutely nothing that can replace hard work when it comes to preparation for the IAS. Because when all is said and done, the Indian Administrative Service is still the premier service in India, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector, across all sectors. IAS officers are still helming the changes for good and for bad within the country, and they are at the forefront of governments. IAS officers, because everybody knows this, I will not emphasize on it, but because IAS officers are there right from the subdivisional level to the district level to the state level to the central level, everybody aspires for it. Therefore, although everyone gives the exams ultimately, although everyone somehow, one way or another, almost everyone, I should say, just to be more precise, almost everyone gives the exam the moment that they graduate from their college. Although almost everyone give that exam, only those who have prepared really, really well clears the preliminary stage. So in the main stage, it's mainly the studious as well as the qualified and eligible persons who get through till the main stage. But my point is, only the best get through, only the best of the best finally get through, but only the best in the country get through. For that reason, you can become the best only with smart work and hard work. Hard work is absolutely essential. You can't ignore that. Especially if, in your opinion, in your self-judgment, you are not particularly intelligent, or that you do not stand out as a bright student, especially for people like that. Hard work, there is no substitute for it, and you should really, really work hard. So what do we mean by working hard? What do we mean by hard work? First, the usual thing is it can be counted in terms of the number of hours that you study on daily basis. But that's not always the case. Of course, the number of hours are important. In order to have quality, you must first have the quantity. In order for the hours that you put into your studies to count, you must have a larger range of the number of hours that you study, right? It's like everything else during office hours also. When you go to office, you probably work from 9 to 6 o'clock, but in order for quality to be there, that long period of time must also be there. Likewise, if you study for 8 hours a day, probably 4 hours a day was really effective. But if you study only 4 hours a day, probably only 2 hours of a day, 2 hours in a day are effective. Therefore, yes, to an extent, the number of hours that you put into the studies is important. So that's where the hard work comes. Now, it's not just about the number of hours that you put in one single day. What is absolutely crucial when you prepare for exams is consistency. Consistency is important. It should not be like today, you're studying for 10 hours or 15 hours today, and tomorrow you decide to go and play, or you decide to watch a really good movie that comes online, and you decide not to prepare for, just say, you're just saying that I'm going to skip the studies today. No, it should not be like that. Every day you have to consistently put in the hours, and every day you should cultivate that habit of studying consistently. This is where most of us falter. The inability to sustain your preparation consistently for a long, extended period of time. Unless you are able to extend it, because there's so much to study, there are so many books you have to read, it is impossible to remember them all. So today you decided to pick up one particular interesting topic and you read for hours on it. But tomorrow you decide not to revise whatever you have read. Then in that case you have forgotten everything and you have to start redo everything that you have done. Therefore, consistency is absolutely essential. So it's not just about working hard today and relaxing tomorrow. If you're working hard today, you should consistently suffer at least for the next 1.5 years. The next point, apart from consistency, is regarding smart work. Now it is often said, yes, in the IAS exam, any question can come under the sun. That's true. But for that reason, people are always being told that you have to study everything. Not true. What to study is definitely important, but what not to study is equally important. You should know what not to study. For example, if you're reading newspaper, you should read, for an aspirant, you should read the newspaper from the perspective of the aspirant. And as an aspirant, there are lots of news pieces that you can ignore. For example, the entertainment section, or the sports section, or the matrimonial section. These sections have absolutely nothing to do with your civil service preparations, except perhaps the title. For example, in cases of sports or in cases of entertainment, except for perhaps the headings, the contents are not important. But what is absolutely crucial is the first page in every newspaper, in every national newspaper, as well as the editorial page. Now, regarding which newspaper is the best, there is no such thing. But when I prepared for it, I read the Hindu and the Times of India. These are my two choices. The Times of India, I read it because I find it entertaining and it's very easy to read. The Hindu, I read it for its editorial purpose. But when you read the newspaper, do not read it in such a way that you have to finish the entire 30 or so pages. No, you don't have to do that. The other trick about reading newspaper, the other smart thing that you should do when you read newspaper is that you should remember, if a topic is sufficiently important, then the newspapers will keep repeating them. For example, if you're reading about contemporary news, then these days, what is one of the most prevalent political news? It's about the political crisis that exists in Rajasthan, right? So when you read about the political crisis in Rajasthan, you do not have to read the entire section. Almost every page, somebody is writing about it, giving their opinions about it. You do not have to read all of those. It's not really that important from the perspective of the aspirant. So if something is sufficiently important, they'll keep repeating it anyway, so you don't have to finish the entire thing in one day. Next day, if it's important, they'll repeat again, but since you're already familiar with the topic, then it will be within your reach, so you can keep reading the same thing. Yeah. The next day, and the day after, and the day after, so on and so forth. So that's about reading newspaper. How about reading books? Even when you read books, like in my time, there was around 10 years ago. So in my time, I read Wizard and Pratiyogita Darpan. These were the ones which I choose, not because somebody says this is good or bad, but one thing that I noticed when I prepared for the exam also is that most of these civil service based magazines, most of these magazines that are made for civil service students, their quality is more or less the same, right? Their quality is more or less the same, but what I would suggest is that if you're reading Wizard, you should consistently read Wizard only because they have a particular style of writing things. And if you're reading Pratiyogita Darpan also, you should consistently read those. The reason I read both of them is that, it's the same logic on why the proverb says we should not put all our eggs in one basket. So for that reason, I read from two, but I could have read from CSR also. I could have read from Chronicle also. I just choose to read these two. It's not because CSR is worse or Chronicle is worse, but because those are the two ones, and those two are the ones that I find myself comfortable with at the time. So I read them. Even if you read Chronicle, even if you read CSR, or if you read some other magazines also, it don't matter. But the point is, be consistent and read the same magazine that we have always read, but at least pick two magazines, right? So about the other subjects, yes, the UPSC always, there is always a gadget notification every year that lists down the things, the topics and the syllabuses for each and every subject. So you should look at those very carefully. But before you start your entire preparation, what I would suggest everyone to do is that you should do a SWOT analysis. Try to see your strengths and weaknesses and assess yourself whether you are really up for preparing for this civil service. And the number one, the most important thing when you do that SWOT analysis is self-confidence. Confidence, having the confidence, having the guts to tell yourself that you can clear this exam. Yes, you can look at the negative side, you can be pessimistic. For example, every year the number of people who give the exam consistently increases. This year it's about 15 lakhs. Last year I think it's about 15 lakhs. It'll keep increasing. In my time it's only around 5 lakhs. So in 10 years the number of applicants had increased threefold. So this increase will keep happening. In my time, out of some 5 lakhs who applied and gave the exam, only around 150 are finally selected for the IAS, and in total around 1,020 of us are selected in various different allied services. So this 150 out of 5 lakh, that translates to around 0.0021% of the total number of aspirants. So that is the reason why this exam, this CSE exam, is regarded as the toughest exam in the world, right? Because people who are at the top, who are considered to be brilliant, who consider themselves to be even more brilliant, and who feels that they can conquer anything in the world and are ambitious enough, it is the place where all these people are competing. And yet, only 0.0023% finally make it for the IAS. You can look at it this very pessimistically, but you can look at it optimistically also. For example, I don't know exactly yet how many seats have been declared this year, but last year I think it was around 100 something for the IAS. But if, for example, 110 seats are declared for the IAS this year, you should say no, it's not 110 seats, it is 109 seats, because that one seat is reserved for you. You should have that level of confidence. If you, obviously, you don't tell these things to other people, but I'm talking about your self-confidence level. It's not like you should be so arrogant that you can't have chickens before it hatches. Not that type of situation, but I'm talking about the level of confidence in your mind. So you should give the exam finally after you do that assessment and you feel that that one seat is essentially reserved for you. When you have that level of confidence, then you're ready. All right. So that is important, that self-confidence part. Secondly, while you have self-confidence, it is important also not to be overconfident. And here I'll tell my own story. When after I cleared my, after I passed out from college and I looked at some old papers, some old civil service exam papers, I became overconfident. I thought, well, this exam doesn't look that difficult at all. What was all the fuss about? I was having that confidence and that arrogance. And I didn't prepare that much because of that overconfidence. I thought, well, if I just read a couple of months before the exams and maybe do readings here and there once in a while, then I'll be able to clear the exam. Because of that, it was a huge jolt when I couldn't clear it my first attempt. I couldn't clear it because of overconfidence. I thought I can clear the exam very easily, and it didn't happen. And that acted as as a very significant reality check on me. So yes, on the one hand, you should have that confidence, that conviction that you can clear the exam, but on the other hand, it's also important to guard yourself against overconfidence. Once you have that sufficient level of confidence, then you start your preparations. Now, when you do the preparations, yes, hard work, and that smart work also, it must go hand in hand. Coming a little bit to the specifics, one about the prelims. Prelims preparation, of course, is a little bit different from mains. One thing, you do not have to practice writing at the prelims level. You do not have to squeeze your writing time in terms of essays and other things. You do not need to correct your grammar and all sorts of things. All that you have to do is try to remember, first, as much facts as possible, and second, try to make the connection between the facts, right? Try to reason things out. Because these days, one thing that all aspirants will notice, it was there in my time also, but it's even more right now. Straight questions are increasingly rare. So that ancient Bihari type of rote learning no longer applies here. Instead, the questions are asked in a very indirect manner. You are being required to use your mind to connect the dots, essentially. But in order for you to do that, you must first mug up the facts. Only you have to know how to connect one fact with another and draw the reasonable inference, which will finally be your answer. For example, about COVID-19 pandemic, they'll never ask you questions like, how many people have died in COVID pandemic? But they might ask you questions like, trace the journey or the timeline of the COVID pandemic. For this, you have to know different facts. You have to know that, okay, COVID pandemic happens during this time, happens during this time, happens during this time, in this place, in that place. But you should be able to make the connection. Or they might ask other questions like, COVID-19 pandemic has nothing to do with this type of illnesses. So they might give you an option and let you choose which one is not. For example, they might give an option as optional SARS-2, or they might give influenza, or they might give something else. So there are no straight questions even in prelims. I mean, it's very rare. There might be one or two here and there, but it's very rare to find straight questions in prelims. GS. Now regarding CSAT. Well, as you know, my background is in philosophy. And for those who have taken philosophy, or at least take one of the 6 subjects in philosophy, which is logic, CSAT would be a walk in the park. It's not too difficult because CSAT is all about reasoning. And I would suggest among the participants here, in case there are participants who are still in class 12 or in your undergrad area, you should keep sharpening your logical skills. That is something that I would heavily suggest. Because CSAT is all about reasoning, whether it's quantitative reasoning, qualitative reasoning, analytical reasoning, or even comprehension. All these things are different aspects of logic. So you should be able to, just hold on, somebody is raising their hand. Am I supposed to take questions now or at the end? Moderator?
At the end. Yeah,
at the end.
Just go on. Yeah, let's take at the end.
All right. So kindly note whatever questions you have, all those people who have raised their hands in during this presentation, and we'll take questions like that. So yeah, so about CSAT, you have to ensure that CSAT reasoning itself is all about practice. It looks like science, but it's all about art also. You must keep reasoning, you must keep arguing, sometimes with others, but not quarrel. That's a different thing. But when we use the word arguing or argumentation in logic, it essentially means having premises which comes to a conclusion or does not come to a conclusion. So there are bad arguments and good arguments. So all these things, all those sort of things comes within that. Now, philosophy, my background in philosophy again is important, not just in logic, but in the other subject in prelims and also mains, which is given, which is ethics, mostly for mains, but we'll come to ethics later on. Now, the other thing, when you are preparing for comprehension and all that, it is important that you read the questions very carefully when you give your exam. Many of the mistakes, those who have given the exams but unfortunately could not clear yet, you would have noticed that by the time you go back home and you recheck your answers, so many mistakes are being committed simply because you did not read the questions properly. It is absolutely critical that you understand the questions before you answer them. The terms might look very familiar, but the questions may be entirely different. They might point to something else. So these are very important that you should understand the question when you attempt it. Rather than rush through it, you should carefully attempt the question. Okay, talking about time management, which is also equally crucial. Time management itself. You should give sample paper test, and for this, by sample test, I do not mean you have to attend the coaching centers and go give the exams there, but if you are sufficiently committed into this project, you can do your sample testing of yourself in your own home itself by looking at first past question papers or by purchasing model question papers and testing yourself. Testing yourself is good on multiple counts, and one of them is time management. If you test at least 3 or 4 model question papers, then you'll be able to know whether you can complete the paper on time. Many a times what happens is many people are unable to complete those questions simply because they did not took regular testing before. It is important that you test yourself so that you do not dwell too long on one particular tricky question paper. On one particular tricky question, if you dwell too long, then that can spoil your entire exam. It can spoil it. If some question looks so tricky that it's going to take some time, just mark it on your question paper and come back to it later on if you still have the time. In prelims, when you mark your answer keys, time is absolutely crucial. You should keep marking. There should be not much stop. In my time, I ensured that initially I devote at least only around 2 minutes to one question, so that I can come back. And in our time, there was no CSAT, but all the quantitative questions and analytical questions were in our time coming as part of our prelims second paper only. So in that paper, all those statistical questions and all those quantitative questions, I leave it for us to be attempted at last, and I attempt the easier questions that do not require too much thinking. Then after finishing those, and I still got time in my hand, I restarted attempting the statistical and the quantitative. And I suggest you should do the same, because time is absolutely crucial. Coming to the main part of our of the exam, one, of course, is your subject matter. Now, the common question which every aspirant asks is what subject I should take. Please remember that there is absolutely no good or bad subject. Once you enter the service, these things do not matter. And there is no such thing as good or bad subject with respect to which subject you should take, but rather what should count is whether you're really interested in the subject, and secondly, whether you can understand that subject. These should be the only two criteria by which you should accept which subject. Do not go by such rumors like this subject is scoring, that subject is not scoring. That rumor is not important. I have a friend, a batchmate, who cleared the exam with Meitei language. And I also have a friend of mine who clears the exam with Sanskrit. I have friends also who clear the exams with history. History, for example, is regarded to be not scoring at all. And then again, there are some people who clear the exam with physics. So it depends upon, you have to look at yourself, do a SWOT analysis, and see if that particular subject you are interested in it. And if you're interested, it means you'll be ready to give time to it. And secondly, which is equally important, whether you can comprehend the subject. Luckily for me, when I took philosophy in migration also because I was interested in it, not because people tell me that it's good or it's bad, but because I was fascinated with the subject. And because I was so fascinated with the subject, I knew virtually everything, the entire syllabus for civil services with respect to philosophy, even before I prepared for civil service exam. That is why for my optional, when I prepared the exam, I did not even study it except in the last month. I did not even prepare for it. All my time I devoted to the other subjects instead. So choosing optionals, you should have only two things in mind. I repeat, one, if you're really interested in that subject, and second, if you really comprehend the subject well. These two things are absolutely crucial. Then your work will be very easy. Now, optionals, yes, assuming that you have done as I said. The other thing, of course, is ethics. This is the new paper. In philosophy, there are 6 branches. One of them is logic, which is crucial in prelims at CSAT level. The other is ethics, which is crucial in mains level. Ethics is one of the 6 core subjects of philosophy. But even when you are prepared for ethics, I was about to write a book on ethics, and I've been approached by this for this by public role, but I just couldn't find the time to write it yet. But there are very good books on ethics already. So when you approach ethics, first we have to know the theoretical background about ethics. There are only 4 approaches to ethics. All right, only 4. Looks very simple. Every ethical question can be reduced to these 4 approaches. One is known as virtue ethics. Second is deontological ethics. Third is, deontological ethics, which is promoted by Immanuel Kant. Third is utilitarian ethics, which is promoted by people like Jeremy Bentham and all that, John Stockton, and all these great philosophers. And finally, fourth is like syncretic ethics, right? We have only these approaches. The fourth one can be like nihilistic ethics. That the fourth one is not really ethics in the sense that the fourth one says that there is no such thing as ethics, right? But the 3 other things, virtue ethics, deontological ethics, and utilitarian ethics or consequential ethics, to use a more broader term, consequential ethics. These are the only theoretical approaches to ethics there are. And it's very easy to master them. You just have to read through it once, understand what they say. We won't have time to go into the details, but understand what these theories are about, what these approaches are about. And once you understand these 4 approaches, any type of problems there are, any types of ethical issues there are, can be subsumed within these 4 things. That is the theoretical side of ethics. Then we have applied ethics, right? Applied ethics, it just comes by reading. It just comes by more reading. All you have to do is use your mind and apply your mind, nothing else. Applied ethics, you face it on daily basis. Like, for example, COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. Here, the government also faces ethical dilemmas, lots of ethical dilemmas. For example, who should they treat first? When it comes to COVID-19 testing, like the problem happened in Italy, and maybe our hospitals can also get overrun. So if you were to select it, on the one hand, you have to look at the fairness component. You try to be fair with everybody when you do COVID-19 testing, so you want to give equal chance to everybody. On the other hand, not everybody are essential to the fight against COVID pandemic. For example, you want to prioritize doctors, nurses, first responders, and health administrators. You might want to prioritize them because they are at the vanguard of the fight, at the vanguard and the rear guard of the fight against COVID pandemic. So how do you do this equation? Because it is essentially a numbers game. This is an ethical dilemma. This type of dilemma, you can look at it in every field of activity. And if you can keep replaying this in your mind, then you'll be ready to give the exam on ethics. Now, so that deals with the subject of ethics also. Now coming to essay. In essay, there's no such thing as right and wrong paper. But what I did was, I was very systematic in writing my essay questions, right? So every essay, like every answer, it begins with an introduction, it has a body, and then it has an ending, a conclusion. It's not just about separating them into paragraphs. It's about the content of those paragraphs too. The body will maybe subdivided to different headings. So, but this is the basic format that you have to follow. So what I did when I was inside the exam hall was I spent an entire hour not attempting the question. You have 5-6 options. So I'm sure out of those 5-6 options, you're very good. You are sufficiently good enough to give in one of them. So whichever question you're most comfortable with, in essay, there's no such thing as scoring or not scoring. So you can give a question, provided you know enough. So whichever questions you're comfortable with, you note them down in summary points first. Note them down. Headings, note them down. I spent an entire hour before I attempted the paper. Before I wrote a single line, I spent an entire hour thinking about what I should write. But once I began writing, I never stopped. It was non-stop writing for the next 2 hours, right? So how did I know that this worked? Because I knew my speed of writing and I knew my style of writing and I had attempted the questions, I had prepared for it. Okay, and about preparations for mains also, how do you prepare for it? In mains, here it's like this. For prelims exam can be seen as if prelims exam is to screen out those who are really not qualified, as well as those who are not really into this exam, but giving the exam for the sake of it, right? So that's the thing. That's one question. That's one thing. But mains exam, the assumption when they give when somebody clears the prelims exam is they are already very invested in it and they have the ability to clear the exam all the way. Mains exam tests not just your ability, but the ability to present, not just your knowledge, but the ability to present your knowledge within that 3 hours time frame. Because like everything else in life, we always work within limited resources. We always work within constraints. There's absolutely nothing in this universe that is not constrained in one way or another. In fact, it is one of the 10 basic economic truths. Resource is scarce. So you should efficiently allocate resources. Likewise, time management, it is absolutely crucial because time is limited. You should be able to put what you know into those 3 hours. If you already clear your prelims, then UPSC already assumes that you are sufficiently knowledgeable. But among the hundreds of thousands who are knowledgeable, whether you have the ability to put your knowledge down in concretely and in a timely manner within 3 hours. That is why writing is very important. It is important both for your time management and also to know what not to write. When it comes to mains, in almost every question, you'll realize that you have too many things to write. Too many things to write. Because you have, by the time you know already too many things. Therefore, it is important to know what not to write. And you can know that only with sufficiently advanced practice. Because you already know sufficiently, but how do you concretize all your knowledge in a way that will be acceptable to the invigilator? For that, you require practice. There's no such thing as practice. Now, regarding what type of books you should choose for your mains as well as for prelims, like I said before, so many books are good. Virtually all the books that are prepared, that have been written for civil services, virtually all of them are good. But in my time, I had used Spectrum publications for most of my subjects, but also Pratiyogita Dharman and Wizard. Also, before all these things, it's absolutely crucial before you start your preparations that it's absolutely crucial that from class 6 to 10 for the art subjects and for 6 to 12 for the art subjects and class 8 to 10 for the science subjects, you should master them, know them. They are the base. No questions will come from there, but unless you master this at the basic level, you won't be able to grasp the advanced subjects. So these are some of the preparations for prelims, for mains. In case people have questions for interview, then I'll take the questions for interview. Otherwise, since it's only 10 minutes remaining till 6 o'clock, I'll stop here and I'll start taking questions. Thank you. Oh, yes. Before I conclude, I almost forgot. For those who come in for Ayushman Bharat, Ayushman Bharat is a health insurance scheme which is being launched by the government of India especially for the social and economically weaker sections of the society across the nation. It is the largest health insurance scheme in the world. But what do we mean by that? It means that if you are if you are a beneficiary of this Ayushman Bharat, the card name is called PMJY card, and if you hold this card, then you can get free hospital treatments in empaneled hospitals for up to amount of 5 lakhs every year, you and your family members. These days, especially, we are very health conscious, and we should be. We suffer from all kinds of illness, all kinds of ailments. Our parents are have become increasingly diabetic. The old ones, they require hospital treatments. For all these reasons, the government of India has launched this important scheme called Ayushman Bharat, where up to 5 lakh rupees you can get free treatment both in public and private hospitals. And the government of Manipur has also done amazing initiatives under the leadership of the Honorable Chief Minister, the Honorable Minister, and the Principal Secretary, Health and Family Welfare. They have done amazing initiatives in Ayushman Bharat. So in Ayushman Bharat, you have to enroll yourself. But in order to be enrolled, you have to be qualified. But in order to be qualified, what do we have to do? Your name has to be in the 2011 socio-economic census list. We should not, we won't go into the details of that, but assume that you are eligible for Ayushman Bharat and call us in the helpline number. For those who want to know the helpline number, I'll give you the helpline number. You can call that center. It's a 24/7 call center, and that call center you can call it anytime you want. All right, it's 24/7. So someone will always answer the phone call to us and inquire and confirm about whether you are eligible for Ayushman Bharat or not. If you are eligible, then you'll get free medical treatment for up to 5 rupees per annum. So for those who want to note down, the moderator may also note it and put it out in the group question. The
Yes,
number
please.
is this free, toll-free number is 1-800-103-2015. 1-800-103-2015. And regarding the enrollment drive, because of this pandemic lockdown, we cannot do offline campaigning right now, unfortunately, but we will be coming out with a new initiative next week. Online enrollment, just like we're doing Zoom here, because the society is moving towards online work also, and since so many things can happen online, anybody who can use WhatsApp, the assumption is anybody who can use WhatsApp can also enroll themselves online. So from next week, we will launch, hopefully by next week, it has already got the approval of the principal secretaries, helping us, he has already approved this thing, and it is ready, essentially ready for launch, and we'll launch it soon. This Google online enrollment form, we are going to use Google survey, and through this online enrollment form, anybody can enroll. So please enroll. Enroll for this. Whenever the scheme comes online, we'll advertise it everywhere. Enroll for this. Tell your family members to enroll also. Tell your friends to enroll. Because unlike so many other schemes where you have to compete for scarce resources, here, as far as Ayushman Bharat is concerned, you don't have to compete. If you are qualified, then you get it. So anybody who is qualified, who is eligible, not qualified, who is eligible, they will be enrolled. It's not like if I'm enrolled, then that person can't be enrolled. That kind of situation is not there. There is no limited seats. Unlike this competitive exam, like the IAS, there is no limited number of seats for Ayushman Bharat. If you are eligible, then you should be enrolled. So please, I encourage you, everybody. Now, the best part about this is you might not be even in Manipur. You may be in Delhi, you may be in Mumbai, you may be in other cities. But as long as your address is in Manipur, then you can enroll in this. All right. So you can enroll, and this benefit, you can use it in your Delhi hospital, in Mumbai hospital, in any other hospitals, provided that hospitals empaneled. So if you are in Delhi and you are sick, or during your preparation, you suffer from dengue fever or from some other fever, and you need to be admitted to the hospital. In that case, if you go to the empaneled hospital using your PMJY card, then you'll get free. That is why this scheme is absolutely crucial, and I'm very thankful to the government that I'm being made the chief executive officer for executing this scheme. The moment that I land here in Manipur, I've been given this charge of Ayushman Bharat, and with the huge support along the way of Sarvul Doma, who is my principal secretary, we have been able to carry out so many initiatives already, and we'll be able to carry out these initiatives. Thank you.
Kipawin ku lal Guite in patchom chasungin ibon sa Kevin IAS hisot hearing in a prepared tawin ibon sa kaiwa pam ikachum video kata sanin asay na jun til thum highlight kaga bon no min khatna hard work. There is no alternative of hard work. Aban le UPSC especially prelim hin through ho to IAS hitading a qualified tina hitan hicho so sila mi to hung kite na chun smart work til smart ta bol do angai na sayin hicho so se chum cho na chun ikigot na subject was ta his in ipipen hung ding ham ke hello his in ikigot na ho pathin mapuina channa angai na asayin pachum piom the zingin to ban zomin technicalities itu EPT ki guna EPT exam ziding dan ho kisanin ay say bewin ate sada tu nailam sa prepare exam bol nga ki go ho nga pachum de setting kata sanin chula Ayushman Bharat schemes ipihamti PM Zevai card ineu angai kho dan ho de ngai chana phachomam ti ai sei pewin tu hin Q&A session ana ludu hitin Chilaya hin question hung kizi ho hi hin race masangin chizo ting le adang personal adong nomom le ana kau hitin chila hin len Guite na hando he did you take any coaching all where at the end as a question ni le thum hila khom thin kamu in sir do you
We'll start from the beginning, right? Okay, let me answer these questions first, right?
Okay, sure, please. So
there are so many books available in market, therefore sometimes it's confusing to choose which books to study. So what books do you recommend for the aspirants who want to clear the exam? Now, like I said, unlike many people, I'm not going to recommend any particular books, all right? Because most of the books are good. Most of the books that are out there are good. But I'll tell you what I had read. You can use that as a pointer. One is, yes, coaching materials. I read from Vaziram coaching materials. Now these coaching materials can be easily accessed in Bersarai market, supposing it's in Delhi, or you have people in Delhi, you can ask them to send it by mail also, no problem. Those who are outside Delhi. And one is coaching material. There is, I think it's important, but which coaching material? It doesn't really matter. It can be from Vaziram, it can be from IAS, it can be from Chanakya. All these coaching materials are more or less the same. Secondly, what I read, these magazines. Two magazines I picked up, like I said, Wizard and Pratyodikita Darpan. So you can pick up the same also, or you can pick up others. Then I read the books by Spectrum Publications because I'm very comfortable with the way they write it. So also you can also do the same. Next is newspaper. Newspaper, at least two national newspapers is important. I read Times of India and the Hindu. For those who cannot read Times of India in the Hindu these days, I mean, out of financial problems or because you are staying out and away from, I mean, you are staying in Manipur or some places, it doesn't matter. There are lots of these Times of India and Addl news or like the Hindu and all that. They have online news also. Just go to the online news and read those. Whatever is available in the online news is almost newsworthy and is almost worth reading. All right, I hope that answered the question. Next question, following up to civil service examination, I would like to, did you take any coaching or where? Yes, I took a coaching for prelims because I was not too confident for that. I took it in Vaziram, but for mains also I took it in Vaziram for this thing, for GS, but for optionals, I did not take coaching in that. Now, whether coaching is important, I suppose that's the reason why you are asking. These days, it's not really crucial. Right, there are many people who have passed the exams by just reading the coaching papers and not actually attending. One of the people in 2018 batch, like Puja Alamba, one of our people from Manipur career itself, she never attended coaching and she cleared the exam. If she can do it, I'm sure those people who can't afford coaching also can. However, having said that, if you can afford to go to coaching classes, then I suggest that you should go because statistically speaking, 99% of us who clear the exam have gone to coaching. But there are exceptions, which means that just because you don't go to coaching doesn't mean that you're not. All right. Just because you can't afford to go to coaching do not be disappointed. Plus, there are lots of materials available online now from which you can choose from. And from YouTube videos also you can check out lots of materials. And for anyone who can afford to put WhatsApp in their phones, then you can do all this. Next question, some standard books. Well, I have already said that. Elaborate on coaching, whether it is ideal to go for coaching or self-study. Well, coaching is never a substitute for self-study. The other thing which I did was when I went for coaching, I did not find it to be particularly useful myself. All right, because it's all about taking notes for hours and hours every single day. So to me, the most important crucial part of the coaching was the first 15 days and the last 15 days. So rather than take full coaching, if we can go for crash courses also, probably they might be more useful. But you should definitely have some coaching notes with you. Those coaching notes are important, which you can get easily from the market by just right? So coaching, one thing you should always keep in mind is that coaching is never a substitute for self-study. Just because you do coaching doesn't mean you should self-study. You should not self-study. Self-study is absolutely crucial. Next, according to you, what are the three most important things to clear civil service exam? One is self-confidence, right? But not overconfidence. Second, hard work. Third, smart work. But I'll add a fourth point to it, the God factor, right? Well, there's nothing you can do about it, but remember, God helps those who help themselves. So these three things in mind and pray, right? Next, how was your daily schedule like during your preparation days? Right, daily schedule. Like I said, consistency is the most important thing. Consistency is extremely important when that is part of your smart work also. Consistency is very important. And if you're reading and preparing for exams, then you should consistently prepare for it. In my time, I wasn't too consistent, to be honest. But had I been more consistent and had I read properly, I would have got through in my first attempt and not wait till the second. Right? Next, when did you make up your mind and decided to go for civil service? Any reasons? Yes, unlike so many people, I never really aspired to become an IAS officer. I wanted to become a professor of philosophy and I wanted to write books about philosophy. I still want to do. That's why I wrote one book already about philosophy and I'm writing one right now even as we speak, which I do it in my free time. These days, because of COVID pandemic lockdown, since I'm working health sector and having 2 other additional chances also, it's difficult to keep up with the writing, but it is my passion and I wanted to go there. However, my father told me, and I think he was very right about it, and I was very happy that he told me that. He told me that even if I become a professor and if I become some renowned intellectual, how is that going to benefit young people? That's what he said. How is it going to benefit us? How is it going to benefit our people? So I took that to heart and I decided to prepare for civil services because my father let me see the light of day, and I never regretted coming to the service. Because the amount of good that you can do as an IAS officer is just huge. As far as India is concerned, there is no substitute for IAS when it comes to social work. And you can do that at every level of your career, right from your SDM level to the secretary level, right to the time that you retire. You can contribute to society. That's why I never regretted my decision of taking the IAS, although it was not my dream. Next question. What was my reaction after securing rank 33rd? Has been a record among tribal. Yeah, I was pretty shocked. The reason why I was shocked was that when I gave my prelims paper, in my time, there were 60 marker questions. Now I think they have done away with 60 marker questions. But in my time, there was a 60 marker question. And when I gave my mains optional geography was one of my optional. Ours was the last batch to have 2 optionals. Mine was philosophy and geography. So when I gave my geography paper, the second paper, I forgot to attempt a 60 marker question. Right. I realized that in the last 3 minutes of my paper. I thought I had attempted everything. I gave my first. Well, there is the reason why, and there's also one reason why we should not count our chickens before they hatch. It's important because when I gave my morning paper, since I was confident about philosophy anyway, I was and I did my GS pretty well. I was a little bit worried about it. So when I gave my paper 1, I did it very well, and I was really happy. Then after lunch, I gave my paper 2. So when just before I gave my paper 2, I was going down through the questions, and I was okay, it is so easy. I'm gonna. So I was happy as heck. I was really happy, and I gave my paper, and I became there. It's important again not to be overconfident. I became overconfident, but then I realized that I finished my entire paper while there was still 30 minutes on the clock. There was still 30 minutes left on my watch, which never happened before. I always prepared for mains, even before, giving the actual exam. When I did my sample preparations, I always did my paper in such a way that I finished 5 minutes before the bell, so that I will have time to revise it at least once. So in all my other papers, I finished it 5 minutes before the bell. But in this particular paper number 2, I finished 30 minutes before the bell rang. So I was very shocked. How is this possible? So I kept checking it again, but I couldn't find any mistake. Until in the last 3 minutes, I realized I forgot to attempt a 60 marker question. And as you all know, 60 marks, not just 60 marks, even 1 mark can make a huge difference between what service you get and what you don't get. In my batch, one guy got IPS and another got IAS because of a 1 mark difference. And I missed a 60 marker question. I was so devastated. I was so sad along the way. When I returned home, I was weeping. I considered myself to be manly enough, but that day I wept. All the way I wept. Reached home, my parents tried to console me, but there was an uncle of mine who told me, okay, let's count your marks again. Let's see if you still have a chance. So when we counted our marks, and we realized that if I did really, really well in my philosophy, in my second paper, in my second optional, then I still have a chance. So, well, in philosophy, I did really well, extremely well. And by the grace of God, with God's grace, I got this, but I wasn't expecting in the top 100. Yeah. I wasn't expecting thing to be in the top 100, so it was a huge shock when I could finally clear it. So I'll move through the other questions real fast now. Is there any limitations of year for clearing CS? Yes, I think unless they have revised it, it's still 35 years for ST community people. So we are very fortunate in this area. We can keep giving until we reach the age of 35. Now the next, give us few important tips for interview. Okay, I'll come to that in the last. Tell us about your job satisfaction. Why do you not choose a Manipur career? As far as job satisfaction, it's always mixed bag, but overall, I'm hugely satisfied, right? There's always pressure here and there. There are certain things that you do not want to do, but since it's not today's discussion, I won't talk about that. But job satisfaction level on a scale of 1 to 10 can be very satisfied. I'll rank mine around 8.
Okay. Question in private ahung din na. It means how something more about smart work, like how to prepare smarter. Please elaborate more.
Okay, all right. I'll take this question right after this one. Why did I not choose Manipur cadre? Right, yeah. I put my Manipur cadre as my second optional. I thought that I was going to go there to Manipur anyway, even if I don't get first optional, and I never expected to get my first optional really. But my first optional was a good cadre. I chose a good cadre because first I love to travel, since it's all the UP cadres. And secondly, because I thought that if you are staying in Delhi, then that gives me more chance to help our people at home. So that was the reason why I didn't choose it. But now I'm back to Manipur at least for a while, and I can always come back. So that question about smart work. Smart work to what not to study. By that I mean there are so many books, thousands of books, we can't read them all. An IAS officer is not expected to know everything. All right. But an IAS officer is expected to know something about everything. Here is the difference between a generalist and a specialist. The specialist is expected to know everything about something, everything about a tiny little bit of thing. The IAS officer is expected to know everything about something. Is expected to know something about everything. He should be able to involve in every conversation. He should be able to talk intelligently about everything, every subject under the sun, because he can be posted in any department. Look at my departments I'm holding right now. I'm holding health, I'm holding water resources, I'm holding minor irrigations. Health and minor irrigation and water resources, they might have some similarities, but it has absolutely nothing to do with health. And before I come to Manipur, I was posted in Texas, in commercial Texas, which again has nothing to do with the department I'm holding now. But IAS officer is expected to know virtually everything there is to know from a project perspective within the first 2-3 months of his being posted. And I can say with some confidence that, for example, about Ayushman Bharat, that I have known more about Ayushman Bharat than most people except my own staff, right? So that is important. You should be able to master almost everything in the outlines. That is the reason why in IAS preparation also, they are asking things, almost everything under the sun, but that doesn't mean that they are asking things in depth, right? So they'll not ask you questions about calculus. They won't ask you questions about, the details of plate tectonics, who came up with this, that in particular, or that. They will ask you the broad questions. And that is why most of the books that you should ignore are PhD level books, right? That's part of your smart work. PhD level books, you can safely ignore them because they are not going to go into that detail. The second thing about smart work, about what not to study, is, like I said, those newspaper things. You should not spend too much time reading too much newspapers, or about piling up your people used to do newspaper cuttings. I never did that. This is a waste of time. We will never ever have time to come back to those bunch of files of newspaper cuttings, and we never do. And like I said, the important questions, the important topics, newspapers will keep writing about them again and again. So it's not needed for you to do COVID-19 pandemic cuttings. Why? Because it's at the news every single day, and they'll keep asking, right? We can go on and on, but I think that will be it for now. How many months with hard work, smart work, G factor, and consistency do you think is okay for? There's no such timeline as such, but the examination period is 1.5 years, so at least 1.5 years, right? But it should be like this, right? Now, if you haven't given your mains exam yet, so let's say, okay, the calendar is a little bit screwed up right now, but the normal calendar is that you give your exam, your prelims exam in May, and then your mains exam somewhere in October, right? Because of COVID-19, it's a little bit screwed up, but let's assume that this is the case. So if it's in May, if you're going to give your exam in May, right now, where are we? Right now, we're in July. So we are close towards, which means we have to assume that for this particular hypothetical, we're assuming we have given your prelims exam already. So after you give your prelims exam, then assume that you are going to clear prelims and start preparing for mains, right? Till October. You have to prepare for mains till October. After the mains exam is over, assume that you are not going to clear the exam and start your preparation for prelims again. You got it? So when you finish your prelims paper, assume you're going to clear mains and prepare for mains. When you finish your mains paper, assume you're not going to clear and prepare for prelims. You prepare for prelims from October, November, December, January. Until January, you prepare for prelims. And from February onwards, you start preparing for prelims again. Yeah, that should be a cycle. Okay. Now, excuse me, how do you motivate yourself during your preparation? Oh yeah, this is very important. Yeah, motivation, this thing is incredibly difficult, but try to imagine that you have no choice. Try to imagine yourself that you are standing near a cliff and that you are about to fall unless you walk properly. Right? That's how I told myself. There's no other choice except to clear this exam. It's a life and death situation. That you have to tell yourself. Standard book for, how to prepare or maintain notes for mains. Okay, questions will keep coming if I keep answering them, and it's getting a little late. How to prepare or maintain notes for mains? Well, the one thing which is really important is your writing skills. How do you get good writing skills? You do not have to be Shakespeare. You do not need Shakespeare level of writing. But what you do need is basic grammatical knowledge and the ability to use correct grammar, at least basic grammar, in your sentences. And by basic grammar, I do not just mean past tense, present tense, and future tense. I also mean putting the right punctuation marks, putting the right continuous tense, knowing where to use adjectives, these things. How do you get this knowledge? By more and more reading and by more and more writing. And by reading, I do not mean WhatsApp type of messages, all right? I mean reading actual books. Everyone has their favorite authors. I also have my own favorite author. In my case, it's Will Durant, who is one of my favorite, and I really imitate his style of writing also. So read more books. And in this particular case, since we are preparing for civil services, try in most of the books, there are no grammatical errors. There are no obvious grammatical errors anyway. So try to copy those writing. The best thing is you should keep writing. There is no substitute to writing as a practice. So you should keep writing. The other thing is, when you are preparing your answers for mains, also know how many and what marks the question are carrying and know how to write them. If it's a 30 question marks, you should know how you should not devote more than, for example, more than 15 minutes to that question. If it's a 2-marker question, then you should finish it in 2 minutes. You should have the ability to do that. And how do we get that ability? By constant preparation, right? Now, other question, why do you still admit yourself for masters and PhD even after getting IAS? Okay, Yeah, these are not really related with the subject, but still, well, like I said, I'm an academic at heart. I love academics. I love studying. I love reading. Rather than say studying, I really love reading. Yeah, so want to contribute something to humanity, not just the IAS. IAS thing is for human in the present generation, but intellectual stuffs. Those are for eternity. Those are for posterity. If we can contribute something useful to human knowledge. So I believe that I'm blessed by God to have the ability enough to contribute something to posterity. And I want to contribute something to that. And these days, you are not taken seriously unless you have PhD degree. So in addition to my IS, if I have PhD also, now they take my book seriously because I'm an IS officer, but they'll take it even more seriously if I have a PhD. And I want to write, and I have about a dozen books that I want to write. So in order to be taken seriously as an author and as an academic, I continue to pursue. Right? Is there any question that I missed?
Hello.
Yeah.
So I have a question. See, for a beginner, if he want to prepare after class 12, so do we need to take
All those engineer students and science students, they end up taking art subjects. All right. Most of them end up taking either public administration or geography. These are their favorite subjects. So, well, there are some exceptions here and there who continue to take maths or science subjects, but most of them end up taking art subject anyway. And I myself am an art student from class 11 onwards. All right. So the best evidence that you have that you do not have to take science or engineering subjects in order to clear the exam.
so you mean to say that like in graduation, if they take arts has it's related to optional, it will be helpful, right?
Oh yes, if you are at least still in class 12, yes, it will definitely be helpful if you take a subject that you are interested in and that you are also good in, and therefore it's a subject that you can take up for your optional during your mains. Because if you do that, you don't have to prepare because you have already known what there is to know in your graduation. So you can save that time to devote it for the other subjects.
Okay, thank you.
Adang question dang nom na layu le khat le ni la be thei hin zo teng le Dr. S chang loi blessing prayer din ha khan ko de.
Hello.
Yeah, please speak.
Sir, can you please hear me?
Yeah,
please.
I can hear you.
Okay, sir. Actually, I asked a question twice in the chat room, but I think you missed it out. And I'm a geography student, and I'm doing my master. And I really love geography. And the reason why I did master is because I really want to know in-depth study about the subject, and I really want to go for this competitive exam. So what are your suggestions for the standard book if I have to
Okay, for prelims, you start with, of course, the NCERT, the basic one, and go Chenglong for physical geography. And then you keep yourself continuously updated as far as geography is concerned in newspapers and other events, because geography is very practical. It's very related. There might be a cyclone here or there, or there might be some incidents happening, earthquakes keep happening. So as far as, also Go Chenglong, in addition to Go Chenglong, this wizard, I mean, they come out with all these competition papers, they come up with special issues. So those special issues are the subjects focus, and you take up those subjects as well. For optionals, for physical geography, I read Savendra Singh. And Savendra Singh, I think that's like the Bible, just like the Bible for me. It's just like, Go Chenglong's is for the Bible for prelims. For human geography, I did not have any particular subjects, I mean, particular books that I read, but I read it topically. So geography is one of those subjects where it's not essential what you read. I mean, it's not really important who writes the subject, because it's very scientific, it's very factual based, and it's very easy to understand. And these are in addition to the Vaziram notes that I have. Vaziram notes also, yeah. Since I took it in geography, I did not go for the coaching, but I took it anyway. And all those class notes, that was very helpful. Okay, so yeah,
Thank you
interview.
so much,
Yes,
sir.
there's all right, all right. Hope it helps. Yeah, the question about interview. Interview is essentially really personality test. It's a personality test, and so you can't really prepare for interview. The only thing that you can prepare for is the background. Before your interview, what I did in my particular case is I use my family members. I use my family members as invigilators. So they lined up as if they are invigilators, and they interviewed me and asked me questions. Now, what do we do then? We check ourselves, right? We check our manners, our appearances, our behavior, right? Whether I'm sitting in a upright position, whether I'm leaning too much, or whether I'm not paying sufficient attention, I'm not looking at the invigilator properly. All these things, even your family members can take a look at, or your friends or your good friends. These are the only things that you can really prepare for an interview. In interview, you are not tested for knowledge. They have already tested you that it means. They are not testing you for what you know. They're testing you for your personality. It's a personality test, not a knowledge test, which they already did. And your personality, your manners has to be good. Now, the other important thing about interviews is the answers that you give, right? Because you can be a very highly opinionated person, but your answers should be bureaucratic, which is to say your answers should be diplomatic in nature. You do not give straight questions on sensitive topics. They might ask the most sensitive question, but you do not give sensitive answers to them. They might ask you questions about, say, what is your opinion on the scrapping of Article 370? So how will you answer that? Would you say, this is wrong? Is this part of the basic feature of the Constitution? You can't do this, you can't do that. No, you should not do that. Instead, what you should say is, Articles 370 is a very important article. And there are all kinds of arguments for and against. For arguments include things like there is this opinion that it is part of the basic structure, although it was temporary, it was put under the temporary provision. And then there is the other side against Article 370, the argument that since the parliament is supreme, since the constitution is supreme, and but the constitution answers the people must ultimately decide what type of law that they can have, including even the constitution. So you should give both sides of the answer. And you should never say, well, you should never take your sides in sensitive issues. That's very important because you're a bureaucrat. You're trained to be a bureaucrat. You are supposed to become a bureaucrat, not a politician. Let the politician deal with the sensitive things. You're not out there to search for the votes. You're out there to serve the people via the elected representatives, right? Now, when are we expecting your second novel, and will it be exciting? Oh, my second book will not be a novel. My second book is about social media. It's also the subject in which I'm doing PhD. And it's about how social media is changing all our behavior, including now. This conference, had it not been for the digital technology, it might have happened physically, or, well, now there is lockdown, had it not been lockdown. But this is happening. This is another form of digital media. So digital media, social media has changed everything. And I'm going to look at how social media changes everything, especially with regards to politics. Now, final question. I recently passed my 12th exam in science subject, and I'm really confused right now as I'm not able to decide which subject. Like I said, there are only two criteria. If you're a civil service aspirant, there are only two criteria of why you should select your graduation subject. Your graduation subject as well as your optional subject. You are class 12, so your graduation subject and optional subject should be the same. All right, if civil service is equal. There are only two criteria. One, whether you are really interested in the subject. Second, whether you're really good in the subject. All right, so these are the only two criteria you should choose your subjects from.
Kipaumin China lam anamano tao hidin. China, one last question to the resource person for this evening. Ahi chu tunil ha athunga tamzo hi UPSC adinga ke go hi win. What are the challenges and obstacles you face while preparing for UPSC exam, and how do you overcome them? I think that would really enlighten them. Can you please?
One is the occasional lack of self-confidence. All right. I had lots of overconfidence when I first gave my exam, but before I prepare and when I didn't clear it, after that I had self-doubts. So I was like, should I have a backup plan? That thing is already in my mind. It was on my mind. But what I would suggest to you is that you should not have a backup plan. Why? Because anybody who can clear at least up to mains, they always end up getting job here one way or another, here or there. So never prepare for any other exams. If you can clear prelims, even if you can't clear mains, you will end up becoming at least a bank PO. All right, you'll end up, so never prepare to become bank PO. At least those who are coming for this talk, never prepare to become a bank PO. Always prepare to be UPSC, to be an IAS officer, so that even if you don't reach here, you'll always find a job somewhere. So that conflict was there with me also. I almost gave an RBI exam. I told myself if I didn't clear my second attempt, I'm going to give RBI exam because, well, after civil services, RBI was, at least in the government sector, it's the best. It's the best difference, right? So, but self-doubt is there. That will always happen. But do not let that self-doubt consume you. As long as you know yourself well, even if the self-doubt is there, you should still maintain the confidence that you can clear. Second thing is, yeah, the other challenge in my particular case is health. I was very weak when I prepared for exam. Just before I gave my prelims exam, sorry, just before I gave my mains exam, I suffered from dengue fever 1 month before, and I fell unconscious also in my house. I need to be hospitalized. And just before I gave my interview, I had internal bleeding. So those were health issues. Luckily, fortunately, might not happen to you. Well, but these things can always happen. And the other challenge which I have, apart from self-doubt, is family pressure, right? Those family pressure will always be there. But you should be able to internalize them. You should be able to internalize those family pressure. And I'll also encourage, in case there are parents out here, not to give too many pressure to your family, to your children, because they already have enough pressures on them. All right.
Kipaume tunil hain ku Haulianlal Guite amata patman tamta imang kom thayuin IAS preparations and Ayushman Bharat in Manipur ti thupi isay pewin tampi iphat somdiu kata sanin chula ti sanin UPSC exam adinga ki go ho nasata apham boost able diu kakinemin tu hinama jong Khangdong cha e ho tabang nga itabang to mun lena nei te ho challenging ma tinga hina to na jong chula tun jong PhD pursue bol kinin beton le zengin ama adinga hin chule UPSC exam adinga to prepare hot at least tun ha hung pang ho pathina nga wang thumpi na a blessing prayer Reverend Dr. S. Changloi ama Ekovin to ki chai le phado ki chai ne hai tai Pu, over to you.
Ki pam le jenge zan la ibol thelo wangun tunin avelin bol thei ki run zan la chun mi zakhat langpi ipang theyun in la tuni som gu vel hong pang na la yin thijong le pate cha record ki bol hi ja chu khunung chan ge ya mi tam inan vet de hin ye chun asebe pon aden oipu Haulianlal chunga ki pathu se yo lo ka hin hongin Khangdong Lamhilin ima ki pe jo jong hi pon in la Khangdong ho sa na zala ita bang platform ise mo wa a platform hi man sa ami tampi na phat chom pi theile I ki gel kho pe na hi zen pate chai hung pan pe wa sei dinga lom het dai dinga pha ho pate chai hil the jeun ki pam le jengin chubanin lulu na hin pate chan moderate in ball peun ama chunga jong ki pa thu ka ga phongin la tu nia hong ki khom ho zo se aden itabang ka het khiel lo le tua thu ei sei peu oi pu Haulianlal zowa hi IAS mu hi umbe talo khadi ni la wa hin je chun Khangdong hona ki tom bol di wi thil tu pi khadin ka gelin dunia thu do hong ki bol ho chu ka ga le dunia thu sei pa hin hoi lai short cut khat hen sei do a phatheya chi chu ki mel chi a mu jeng dam ti ta bang chui ge loi mai the in la ei sei pi thu pi pen ta chu ha bola ki bol di tom ngai ta pan ding ti pa cha hi hi chi khel la chu lo hi ti pa chu igel do di win ka temun je chun na bon tau chunga ki pa thu kan sein chole pathian in phat thei na bo untin tu chunga jong nain bol tengule mi za nam zen nain mu thei na di win pa hinga i tau di win ka de yin ke ma oging in hung pangin ka ting na bonun no jong tau un tia ka tim nei ve tau te engai lu wa hingjing ka pathian de lung set ku tu nau kidang ta tunin jong kala awa kachate ho kanaute ho hitabanga hunglo thinga adi a chate naute hin hil son thei dinga jong ahung pan thei ta je un ka ki pan min lo pi ka tham baw he ade sanin oi pu Haulianlal in Khangdong sa ki hil na thei ta IAS an ji do hi Khangdong tam pi dinga jong ki chou na hin Khangdong tam pi dinga jong pan sat na len ta hi ding ka ta sanin ama zalin na min lo pi ka tham baw na hi nang mana hin khuwa pan pin lang tam thei phat thei na pen lang onung chan ge jong kanam piu khom pi phata hung pan thei na ding in phat thei bo in ta jong na lung set na ngai cha ka tau pi hi chule tunia hung za wa Khangdong tam pi ho chule ahin ngaya hi chi recording hin jadinga hin ngai dinga Khangdong ho zo se jong nang mat dam thei phat thei na pen lang thuki se ya ko na hi amo ho hin khuwa ki til na hi a khan to na nei wa chule ki son na nei wa pathian tha so le hela in kho man wa pathian nangma gel do a lol hin na nei thei te na di vin jong na lung set ko to na ngai chan ka tau pe he ke ho ka hi win chule tunia hung pa ho hin chule tu kum sunga IAS in peding ka cha te ho ka nau te ho hoi lai mun am jong le hilaya pang ho hin apang lo ho hin jong nang man phat thei bon na ki thu pin tia na lung set ko to na ngai cha engai lo wa hingjing ka pakai Jesu Krista mina ka tau he Amen. Amen.